The following message is by Pastor John Piper. More information from Desiring God is available at www.desiringgod.org.
George Mueller was a native of Germany. He was a German, a Prussian. He was born in Koppenstadt, September 27, 1805, and he lived almost the entire 19th century. He died in 1898 at the age of 92. He saw the Great Awakening in 1859, about which he said it led to the conversion of hundreds of thousands of people. He did follow-up work for D.L. Moody. He preached for Charles Spurgeon in his tabernacle, and he clearly and explicitly was the inspiration of Hudson Taylor's way of doing missions. So that's some of his connectedness in the 19th century. He spent almost all of his life in Bristol, England, pastored the same church there for over 66 years. A kind of independent, premillennial, Calvinistic, Baptist church that celebrated the Lord's Supper every Sunday and admitted into membership non-baptized people. Now, if that sounds unconventional to you, that's accurate. In fact, it would not be wrong to say that Mueller was eccentric. And not just in his ecclesiology, but in almost everything he did. He was eccentric and unconventional. But A.T. Pierson is right, I think, to put a very positive spin on that by pointing out that almost all of his eccentricities, maybe all of them, resulted in large-hearted, outward-directed ventures. His eccentricities were not like most of our eccentricities, sort of ingrown and peculiar about us. And his were all creative and outward. So Pierson said, he devised large and liberal things for the Lord's cause. I really like that phrase. He devised large and liberal things for the Lord's cause. 1834, so he's 29 years old. Actually 28, he founded the Scripture Knowledge Institute for Home and Abroad. It had 5 what he called objects. We'd call them ministries, which sprung out from his church. The reason he invented a new mission and left the LMS, the London Missionary Society, is because of his disillusionment with postmillennialism, liberalism, and worldly strategies like going into debt, which he never did and thought was unbiblical, both to buy a house or anything else. His 5 ministries, besides the church, were schools for children and adults, 2, Bible distribution, 3, missionary support. He was a great supporter of Hudson Taylor. 4, tract and book distribution. And the most famous one, number 5, in his words, quote, to board and clothe and scripturally educate destitute children who have lost both parents by death. He would not admit all orphans. That's a pretty narrow definition of orphan, and that was his working definition. He wouldn't even admit children born out of wedlock. He was eccentric in almost everything he did. His accomplishments in all 5 of these ministries were really remarkable. I have a long footnote I won't read documenting the statistics. The most famous one that you're all aware of is his orphan ministry. He built, over the years, 5 large orphan houses. Very large. Altogether, they would hold over 2,000 children. Over his lifetime, he cared for 10,024 orphans. When he started in 1834, there were accommodation in all of Britain for 3,600 orphans. There were twice that many children under 8 in prison in 1834 in England. And by the time he was done with his life of ministering to orphans, by virtue of the inspiration he became to other people for ministry, there were, let me get my statistics right here now, at least 100,000 orphans being cared for in homes in England when he died, as opposed to 3,600 when he began. He did all of this while preaching every Sunday when he was in town at his church from 1830 to 1898. That was his tenure as pastor. Probably 10,000 times he preached to his own people. When he turned 70, he fulfilled a life dream because he had belonged to the London Missionary Society and hoped to be a missionary and fell out of favor with them because of some of his ecclesiological and theological eccentricities and never became a missionary. But when he turned 70, he fulfilled a dream, and for the next 17 years, I love this, till he was 87, he traveled the world to 42 countries, preaching on an average of once a day to over 3 million people. 9 times he preached in Minneapolis in 1880, 9 years after the founding of my church. I like that statistic. I wish I knew. I'm standing in the very place, of his preaching in Minneapolis in 1880. So when you turn 70, Randy, talk to us about this tonight. Talk to us about retirement. Talk to us about funds and insurance and golf and shell collecting. And you've read the book. That's good. Or listen to the tape. From the end of his travels then, so he's 87, 1892, till he died in 1898, he preached again in his home church, and he worked with the orphans and the Scripture Knowledge Institute until he died at age 92. And he said when he was 92, not long before he died, I have been able every day and all day to work, and that with ease, as 70 years since. So God blessed this man with unusual health almost all of his life. There were a few seasons where he was laid up, but by and large, this man was incredibly healthy, and I can't help but think the Lord simply delighted in his generosity because he owned nothing and gave everything. The funeral was held the following Monday, died March 9, 1898, on a Wednesday, and the funeral was held in Bristol. This is a quote now, tens of thousands of people reverently stood along the route of the simple procession. Men left their workshops and offices. Women left their elegant homes or humble kitchens, all seeking to pay a last token of respect. This one brought me to tears. 1,000 children gathered for a service at Orphan House number 3. They had now lost their second father. This eccentric pastor and lover of orphans was gone. He had read the Bible end to end almost 200 times. He had prayed in millions of dollars. I could give you the number in pounds in the 19th century, but I have no idea what that would translate into. One estimate was $70 million, but that was A.T. Pearson, and he lived simultaneously. He was a contemporary. Never asked anyone for any money directly. Never took a salary for the last 68 years of his life. Trusted in God to put it in people's hearts to give what was needed to him and to the thousands of orphans in his care. Never took a loan, never was in debt, and never went hungry, nor did any of his orphans. The eccentric pastor was now gone. He had been married twice.